Last year, Robert Johnson took his own life in his cell at the Darwin prison. More than 12 months on, his family is still searching for answers. Legal advocates say the prison is appalling and top corrections officials are saying it's time for it to close. Miles Morgan reports.
He was proud to be Aboriginal. We always knew where we came from and who our family are. He always strived to learn whatever he could about our culture. He learned how to play the didgeridoo from a young age. He was a very big family man. Family was everything to him.
On the 23rd of January last year, 34-year-old Bob Johnson was alone in a cell at Berrima Jail when he took his own life. He was on remand, facing a charge of theft.
I'm trying not to cry, but he always called all of us on our birthdays. He knew when our birthdays were, so, you know, it's really hard to celebrate. My birthday's a few days after he passed away, so it's still hard.
You want some carrots?
More than a year on, his sister Sharon Wallace is still coming to terms with the death and is looking for answers. Her brother had long been troubled by substance abuse and had been in and out of jail for almost 2 years.
He did have mental illnesses, and I believe going to prison, that separated him from the ones that he loved. Prison wasn't a problem for him. He could do prison, no worries. It was the separation from his loved ones, from his family. That was what worried him and stressed him more than anything else.
I think one of the great tragedies today is that many of the deaths that occur, whether it's by way of people with physical illnesses or mental illnesses, could be prevented, could be avoided if a duty of care was taken more seriously.
One of Australia's foremost authorities on Aboriginal crime and punishment, Professor Chris Caneen, says prison is a stressful and taxing environment.
They're placed in isolation, they're often placed in overcrowded conditions, and they're in situations where there's limited programs or treatment for the type of drug and alcohol problems that they have or the mental health problems that they have.
The North Australian Aboriginal Justice Agency's Jonathan Hunyor says Indigenous prisoners lose more than just their liberties.
Everyone that is locked up in that sort of environment is dehumanised. I think it carries a massive stigma. It undermines people's confidence. It takes them away from the positive influences in their lives that will help them effectively rejoin the community and not re-offend.
Last week, there was a coronial inquest into the death of Bob Johnson, and lawyers for his family argued the prison failed in its duty of care. It was yet another Indigenous death in custody, 20 years after the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody.
Conditions out of Berrima at the moment are appalling. People aren't getting the services they need, and there's a grave risk of other incidents happening.
At the inquest, the Executive Director of the Territory's Correctional Services, Ken Middlebrook, didn't argue the prison was substandard. It's a struggle every day. He's dealing with greater levels and numbers than he can handle. Then there was this astonishing claim. The only improvement he could make to the main part of Berrima Jail is with a bulldozer. Mr Middlebrook said most problems would be overcome in 2014, when Darwin's new prison is built at Holts near Palmerston.
There's no doubt that the current prison at Berrima is grossly overcrowded, but the problem is that new prison will be opened, and if you come back and interview me in 12 months' time, I'm sure we would be discussing the problem of the overcrowding of the new prison.
Bob Johnson's family allege he was viciously assaulted by several prison guards in mid-November 2009, 2 months before he died. Sharon Wallace says many prisoners witnessed the attack.
They all saw my brother getting kneed, elbowed. Some say that he was punched. At no stage was he just a little bit roughed up and handcuffed. And I know what my brother is like, and he wouldn't have been able to cope with something like that.
Whatever happened in Bob Johnson's cell was followed by what his sister says was a pseudo-seizure, a non-epileptic seizure brought on by stress. She says her brother was traumatised by the incident and it compounded his mental problems.
He had all the signs of that, being non-compliant. The circumstances that led to them trying to justify their assault was the fact that when they unlocked the cells, everyone's supposed to stay in their cell until they finish the unlock and then they're allowed to come out. Well, that day he came out early and that was his non-compliance. This is what justified them to go back then and question him and then tell him that they're going to remove him to separate confinement. And he protested against that. He said, I haven't done anything wrong, because he did go back into his room when he was asked to go back in.
At the inquest, Corrections defended its handling of the incident, saying officers used minimal force for the prisoner's own safety, and he directed that the officers involved be removed from that area. But Professor Chris Caneen says prisons have an overwhelming duty of care.
When someone loses their liberty, when someone is placed in custody, there is a higher level of duty of care placed on custodial authorities, because once people lose their liberty, they're incapable of protecting their own interests, they're incapable of looking after themselves. And so custodial authorities need to take precautions, particularly with people with mental illnesses and histories of suicide attempts, to ensure that the situation doesn't allow for those things to occur.
Bob Johnson's death was reviewed in detail during the inquest. His family heard recordings of final telephone calls to his partner and saw footage of guards discovering his body. The inquest has been adjourned till later this month to hear more about the alleged assault by prison guards. A year after the death, Sharon Wallace remembers her brother through this lizard he made with his bare hands.
No doubt there's lots of my brother's DNA on this.
She hopes her brother's death will bring about fundamental changes in the way Indigenous prisoners are dealt with.
It's almost a bittersweet feeling for us in the family, because we want to put forward recommendations, but in a way it's too little too late. If they had have put things in place before, my brother might be still here. And the coroner was very vocal he brought up a couple of inquests he'd done in the past where he had made recommendations, and these gaps in services are still coming up now in my brother's death.